We're in the 5th year of the Syrian humanitarian crisis. The United States has contributed over $4.5 billion in both direct assistance and through 3 UN crisis appeals, with nearly 75% going through the latter, the crisis appeals. Yet there seems to be no end in sight in this tunnel. Russia's recent intervention is causing serious security concerns for not only the people of Syria, but the NGOs and the aid workers on the ground trying to bring assistance to those in desperate need. The front lines are shifting and the battle lines are fluid, causing uncertainty and making it increasingly dangerous to deliver aid to certain areas and making it increasingly dangerous for Syrians who remain in their homeland. The situation has gotten so bad that we're now seeing Europe struggle to deal with its greatest migration and refugee crisis since World War II, as many fleeing the Syrian conflict are trying to make their way into Europe. But while the European crisis may be grabbing the headlines at the moment, let's remember that this crisis was not created yesterday. For years, the people of Syria have been impacted, and the Syrian refugee crisis has also impacted countries like Jordan, like Lebanon, Turkey, and Egypt, and yet many in the international community ignored these countries' pleas for assistance. These countries are more vulnerable because they have less capacity and less resources to deal with the crisis. Let's take Jordan, for example. About 630 Syrians have been registered by UNHCR, plus hundreds of thousands more that have already assimilated in Jordan, all of which pays an incredible burden on the kingdom to provide basic services to over 1 million new people. But with more and more refugees seeking to reach Europe from Syria and its neighbors, there will, of course, be those seeking to take advantage. We're now seeing smuggling networks popping up in Turkey, Lebanon, Libya, and elsewhere, turning trafficking in Syrian refugees into a billion-dollar industry, and also creating security concerns as we have no way of knowing who is being smuggled into Europe and elsewhere. And with President Obama's announcement that the U.S. will take in 10,000 Syrians, this also raises concerns for many in the U.S., especially in light of the FBI director's testimony to Congress last week that the U.S. may not be able to properly vet all of those seeking to come to our nation. As a legislative body, this is something that we must take seriously. If we cannot guarantee the proper vetting of these refugees, it would be irresponsible for us to promote it. We must protect our country first and ensure that all security measures are in place to properly screen these individuals before they come into the United States. We cannot compromise the well-being of the American people or our national security. Unfortunately, it has taken Europe's worst migration crisis to awaken the Europeans now that the Syrian conflict is knocking on their borders. The United States has been the largest single to the Syrian humanitarian crisis response, dwarfing the contributions made by any other nation and by the European nations as a whole. There's no way to tell how things may have turned out differently had other nations stepped up to the call like the United States did. Earlier this month, committee staffers traveled to Geneva to meet with many of the organizations that receive our assistance for the Syrian humanitarian crisis, and from their trip, one thing was clear. The response to the crisis has been dreadfully underfunded, with a nearly 2/3 funding gap. Of course, the problems we need to address are many, and they are difficult. And it's true that they can never be a solution to the refugee crisis until the underlying root causes are addressed. And that means finding an end to the fighting, an end to the terror, and the removal of Assad from power. But we need to be less reactive and start being more proactive. We need to start thinking of ways not just to address the refugees' most immediate needs, but the needs that they face in the years to come. And we can't do it alone. We need to press our European friends and our partners in the Middle East and Africa to step up and do more. We need to do a lot more to ensure that the needs of the host communities in Syria's neighbors are being met as well, because this has taken a very big toll on their resources, and it is leading to increased tension between the communities. There is a pervasive feeling of hopelessness and despair that will have a long-term impact on the region and beyond. Syrians, for the most part, want to eventually return home, According to some NGO implementing partners on the ground that have conducted surveys on this, some 90% of Syrian refugees reportedly state that they do have a desire to return home. But that desire may fade if the international community does not step up and to ensure that there is a safe home for them to return to, and to demonstrate that we are working toward a better future for those who have been impacted so severely by the Syrian conflict. And with that, I'm pleased to yield